It's exactly 11:50, and we are now joined by Dr. Neil Butkow. He lectures in pharmacology at Wits University, and we're going to talk to him about the COVID-19 vaccinations. Um, how effective are they? How safe are they? And why is there such great pushback as far as certain sectors of the community are concerned? Neil Butkow, good morning. Welcome to the program. We don't have you on camera. We think your camera has been switched off. Do you just want to check if we can get a picture of you, Neil? Good morning. Welcome.
Hi, Julie. I don't know if I have a camera, so I think let's just keep it. And
Okay, no
maybe
worries.
it's better that way.
No worries. Okay,
Okay.
Neil, we're waiting with bated breath in South
Yeah.
Africa for the rollout of the vaccines. We do know that quite a large number of frontline healthcare workers have already been vaccinated.
Mm,
The few of whom that I have spoken to haven't reported any adverse effects.
mm.
As a pharmacologist, I think a few issues do come up as far as the vaccine is concerned. But even before I get there, I think the one most important question to ask is it is also flu season. 1st of
Yes.
April saw the beginning of autumn, and not too long off in the distance, we're going to be in our winter. And we do know that flu hits us very, very badly. With COVID doing its rounds so aggressively globally, should we still be focusing on flu vaccines? And if I do take a flu vaccine, is it still advised that I take a COVID vaccine when my turn comes around to take it? Will there be any interaction? Is it safe enough? How do we move forward on this issue?
Yeah. So I mean, I think you're right. Flu season is on the horizon, and especially for high risk type of people, those with comorbidities, the over 65s, those that are exposed to viruses. I think there's a case to be made for actually getting the flu vaccine. We know, but the flu vaccinations have been around for 40, 50 years now, and they are effective and they are safe. The incidence of flu is much, much lower than COVID, and the severity of cases is also like tenfold less than, so the mortality and the morbidity from flu is not very high. But, if you've ever got flu, you will know about it. I mean, it's extremely
Absolutely. Yes.
uncomfortable. Yeah. So I don't know if we've had any studies that have really shown an interaction between the two vaccinations, but in our own sort of in our own bodies itself, I mean, we've had numbers of different vaccines. The MMR. There's
Yes.
also been the hepatitis B, the polio vaccine. So we used to getting different vaccines at some stage, and our immune system is well sort of tuned in order to produce immunoglobulins, neutralizing immunoglobulins against a whole host of different diseases.
So, Neil, let's look at the issue around the conspiracy theories as far as the COVAX is concerned. I
Yeah.
think one of the issues also is, um, I guess, certain religious groups and, whoever, there are suspicions around the ingredients or the chemicals or the medications that are contained
Mm.
in the COVAX. As a pharmacologist, what do you say? That's the one issue. The second issue is there's also concern about the fact that all other vaccinations were produced after very long periods of research and trial and error, whereas whereas COVID-19 vax was produced way too quickly, and I think people are concerned about the safety of these vaccinations because it was produced in such a short space of time. Maybe the fear is that not enough trials were run. We don't know enough about the vaccine. We're not sure if it is as effective as the large pharma houses claims them to be. Your thoughts on all of these concerns? Added to that also is we heard on mainstream media that certain of these vaccines, I'm not sure which one is it, whether it was AstraZeneca, which one it was, but anyway, it is reported that those vaccines do cause blood clots in certain populations or certain people that have received them.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think we do need to be vigilant, and we do have to interrogate the information and the data that is published. But it's very easy to just break open a vial and do a complete sort of analysis of what we're actually looking at. So, I think you said something about the contamination thing.
Yeah.
These vaccines are actually quite unique, especially well, all of them in fact, but the Pfizer and the Johnson one are unique in that they've actually got something called messenger RNA, which is active, and what it's going to do is it's going to get into our cellular mechanism and produce actually the antibodies that we actually need to protect us against the spike protein of the virus itself. um, and so, yeah, so it's a new way of harnessing the body's immune response to, to any kind of virus, etc. So this is what also has to happen here is that sort of part, that messenger RNA, has to be covered in a fat layer because it's got to get into our cells. And the only way that it can really get into our cells without going onto some kind of a receptor mediated process is with that fat layer. Once it gets into the fat layer, the host cell will dismantle the fat layer, and it will use that messenger RNA to start making immunoglobulins against the spike proteins. So a lot of what has been done with these vaccines is that they use pork gelatin sometimes in order to protect the actual messenger RNA. That is where I think part of the problem is coming from. But
Now
for me,
we're talking to a mainly Muslim audience here.
yes,
Obviously, we would want to make sure that we're not vaccinated or the vaccines we get do not contain the pork gelatin. How do we go about obtaining the information and making certain that we get a vaccine without that fat or that pork gelatin?
the companies do have to disclose all of the ingredients in the actual vaccination. And so that it would be up to them also to actually disclose whether it was pork or cow or whatever, what other mechanisms they were using to enclose their messenger RNA. But I don't know, unless they actually have a manufacturing process that uses other types of fat molecules, like let's say cow or chicken or something like that. I would think it's extremely unlikely that you would actually find, with those type of things, that they would be making vaccines, non-pork.
Mm-hmm. So that does leave a very big question mark and concern as far as possibly Jewish and Muslim communities are concerned, and even some Christian communities. But I have no doubt they are certain, because there are quite a number of different
Yes.
pharmaceutical companies that are involved in the manufacture of these vaccines. For example, the Turkish Muslim doctor in Germany, he would have given, I hope anyway, he would have given thought to that issue as far as the sensitive communities are concerned. By that, I mean, obviously, the Muslim and Jewish communities.
I understand that, Julie, and I'm not trying to say that it's justified, but these are life-saving interventions. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that these vaccines are going to almost save the world, if you like. And
Mhm.
it's not about preventing COVID disease in absolutely everyone, but it's reducing the severity of the disease and ensuring that hospitalizations are down, that we don't have so many resources around hospitalization, because the morbidity, the mortality rate of this disease in certain specified subgroups is incredibly high. And
Mm, mm.
and you know
Do we know why? Do we know why?
Well, we know that these are high risk people. So, people with
Uh-huh.
a history of respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, uh, uh, older people, people with COPD, smokers,
Mm,
all
mm,
of those
mm.
type of people have got a mortality rate which is like sometimes 10 to 20%.
Okay.
That is
So,
incredibly high.
right. Neil, then also, we're hearing that the life or the coverage that you're getting with certain vaccines is perhaps 6 months or a year only, very much like the flu vaccine, obviously. Does
Yeah.
that then indicate you're going to have to keep on taking the vaccine every 6 months or every year just to cover yourself?
I think it'll depend on. I think what we'll get to is the stage where we can actually monitor how many neutralizing immunoglobulins you've actually got. Because if you've still got after 6 months to a year, you don't need the vaccine again. But if you don't, I would be very happy to be to be injected with something, like, even if it was every week, I would take it. If it
But
if
how
it
do
was
you
going.
know? How do you know that you have enough of those immunoglobulins in your system that you don't need additional shots of the vaccine?
Because we can actually measure that. I mean, and that's what a lot of people. The most common way of actually looking to see if you've got COVID-19 is to actually look for the virus itself. Especially in
Mm.
nasal and throat sort of swabs.
Ah,
But
okay.
right. So what we're looking for is the actual virus itself, and how many viruses are actually there. But what's more important is, how does the body mount some kind of immune response? And there we're talking about these things called immunoglobulins. And
Hmm.
what we're now seeing is that there are lots and lots of people that have been exposed to COVID-19 and have never shown symptoms and have been
Hmm.
producing immunoglobulins, and we can now test that, much more
Mm.
expensive than just looking for COVID-19, but it will get to the stage where we can actually measure that. And if you have to have another shot in 6 months or 12 months, I think we'll just have to do it for the next couple of years. I mean,
Absolutely.
this has to be a community response, and everybody has to participate. We know that now, Julie. There's no place for conspiracy theories, and for, like, saying, I'm not going to take this because it's made with pig fat. Can't afford to do that.
But what about, well, look, you're going to get pushback from a lot of communities as far as
Yes,
that is
I know.
concerned. And it does mean, I truly believe that it does mean that the pharmaceutical companies are going to have to re-look at what they should and must substitute. Otherwise, a great number of people are going to
Mm.
refuse the vaccine. So that's
I,
just something that they need to
yeah,
re-look at. There has to be, I mean, in this day and age, there has to be something that you can substitute with. And then also, if I get the vaccination, Neil, does that, and this is where I'm really scared, is people throwing caution to the wind. So they get vaccinated and they don't carry on the other protocols like masking,
absolutely.
washing hands, social distancing. Once I've got the vaccine, it doesn't mean that I'm in the clear, does it?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I've heard a couple of different things about the vaccinations, and it's not about providing protection. It's about ensuring that if you do get the disease, that it's mild and non-fatal. I mean, that really is the thing. Because if you
Mhm.
land up in hospital with all the adverse effects, you, you know, um, they were talking also about stroke being quite common in in young men. Now, like that is terrible. For a 40-year-old man with COVID who lands up in hospital and now suffers a stroke and something called disseminated intravascular coagulation. Those are fatal illnesses now, Julie. You're not going to recover from that. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right, right.
But I mean, I do
Yes,
agree.
carry
I
on.
mean, the pharmaceutical companies do have to look at these things, and they do look at these type of things. But I think that until we have the technology to really put these things in place, my fear would be that like the Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer vaccines would all have to re-go clinical trials to prove that the encapsulated virus, or sorry, the encapsulated messenger RNA, which is what they're using, is actually being delivered at the same type of thing as the previous ones. That's what I worry about.
Why? Why do you worry about it?
Because
What do you
we
think could
can't
go wrong?
I don't think it's a matter of it going wrong, but what happens if it isn't actually transported into the cell in exactly the same way? And what happens if the efficacy is much lower, or it actually causes some kind of immune response that we didn't bargain for? Those are now we have to go back to the drawing board and retest. The Moderna and the other trials and the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca were done on 40,000 people, Julie. Those those are huge trials. There is no drug at the moment on any kind of medication list that has gone through 40,000 people. It just will not happen. And so we are going to have to maybe just say, look, this is for the good of the community. This is for everybody. That ensures we can't sit around and have discussions about, I call it, looking at, in Catholic terms, having a discussion about how many angels fit on a head of a pin. We can't do that. We've just got to bite the bullet, take this in. Let's get this over and done with right now. We are in South Africa. We've done about 135,000 vaccinations. That's less than 0.5% of the total population. The plan was to get 50 million vaccinations by the end of the year, 67%. That's never going to happen, Julie. Yeah, we need global and we need community buy-in. We need to stand together and say, you know what, stuff the conspiracy theories. Let's put aside our things about contamination and all that type of thing. Let's get this done. And you're right, we've got to keep the social distancing and the masks and the hand washing and all of that stuff. I can't hear Julie anymore. Are you still there? I've lost you, Julie.
Neil, are you there? Neil,
Hello?
are
Yes,
you
I'm
there?
here. Sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
wonderful. I've got us reconnected. We're
Okay.
almost at the end of the interview.
Mm.
What I do need to know, Neil, is those of us that really do feel that we're going to go for this vaccine because it is for the greater good and it's going to heal the world rather than harm the world.
Yes.
But we're not necessarily happy with the rollout by government, or let's assume I would favor a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but what I'm offered is something not to my liking. What happens then?
You'll just have to wait until you can get access to the other one. But I was listening to a program now, and they said, "What is the best vaccine? The best vaccine is the one that you offered, and the one that is given to you."
Okay,
But
even though the efficacy may be only 50%, and that's really taking it rather far, but I do know some of them are only sitting at 50%.
yeah, the Johnson
You
and
still reckon that one should go ahead with it?
Whatever that one they offered me, I will take. I really don't mind. The Johnson and Johnson one is about 57%, but that must also put into context that it was actually a lot of the data actually came out from South Africa, and we had this variant that everyone's talking about, the 1.133 BE.
Yes,
BE was the
yes.
variant. And
Mm,
so
mm.
the efficacy against that variant was much lower than in other parts of the world where they've only got the 501 variant. And so that has to be put in perspective. So even though the Johnson one only gives you about 57%, it's actually made up of about 60, almost 67, 68% in other parts of the world. And because they had to put the results together, that dropped the efficacy. So you've got to be very sort of careful about how these things are actually interpreted, and what we're actually looking at.
Okay, Neil.
Mm.
I guess that the other the other thing that we ought to be prepared for is mutations and different variants. So you
Yes.
get vaccinated and you're not necessarily home free or home safe because the vaccine mutates and there's a whole host of variants that are beginning to now emerging all around the
Mm.
world. Where does it leave us? As a scientist yourself, where and how do you see this playing out? And how many more years of COVID-19, lockdown, social
Mm.
distancing, masking, hand washing, etc., do we have to endure? Or is this going to be now our new normal?
I don't. I think it'll also burn itself out like the Spanish flu in 1918. By 1990, 1920, there was almost no cases of the Spanish flu because everyone that had caught it that was going to die died, and the other people had some intrinsic type of protection against it. I think the same type of thing is going to happen, but in addition to that, there's going to be more and more people that have got immunoglobulins and more and more people that are going to be protected against the disease. And so it'll find a much smaller and smaller population to be active against. And I think it's just going to be a matter of that. But I think that in the interim, we need to carry on with all those other things, the masking, the hand washing, all of that type of thing is absolutely, imperative, Julie.
Okay, and that's where we leave it. Neil Butkow, thank you indeed for being with us on the show today. Let's hope that the pharmaceutical companies wake up
Mm.
to the fact that one of the reasons why they're having pushback is the issue around the pork fat, and they need to
Yes,
come up with something else in place of the pork fat. And in this day and
we will
age
tell
of
them. Yeah.
modern science and technology, you better tell them, please, Neil, because you're in the scientific world. Thank
I,
you for being
I
with
will.
us.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Have a great day. Bye bye.
Uh,
It's 12:13. We've overrun slightly, but that's what happens on live radio. So we do hope our next guest is standing by and going to forgive us for being a little late this morning. But let's take an ad break before we are joined by Elinia Kolokotronis.